All right, ready to dive deep into some serious Linux networking magic. This time, we're exploring those essential commands that can really unlock a network's secrets.
We're talking about the commands that can give you X-ray vision into how networks actually work, how to spot vulnerabilities, and even how to manipulate them.
Our guidebook for this deep dive is Linux Basics for Hackers, and it jumps right in with this command ifconfig. Seems simple enough, but what can it actually tell us about a network?
We'll think of ifconfig like getting your hands on a network's blueprint. It's like suddenly being able to see everything laid bare, your IP address, the network mask, broadcast address, MAC address. It's all right there.
So almost like we're looking at a network's DNA, huh? But what does all of that actually mean for someone who wants to, maybe explore some of the less traveled corners of the digital world?
I like that analogy. And think of it like this. If you want to navigate a city, you need a map, right? Well, if config is like getting your hands on a network's map, it doesn't just show you where you are, it shows you how to get to where you want to go, even if those paths aren't publicly marked.
So it's the starting point for any real network exploration. Now, the source also gets into wireless networks with the iconfig command. What makes that command so important in the world of wireless communication?
iConfig, that's your key to the wireless kingdom, basically. It tells you everything about your wireless adapters, those little devices that let you connect to Wi-Fi.
So we're talking about more than just connecting to the Wi-Fi at the coffee shop here. What kind of deeper insights can iConfig really give you?
Let's just say that with iConfig, you can do a lot more than just connect to a network. You can actually see other devices that are on the network, how strong their signal is, even the kinds of data they're sending back and forth.
Okay, now that sounds like we're moving into some serious network analysis territory. The book even mentions something called promiscuous mode, which honestly sounds a little bit concerning.
Promiscuous mode, yeah. Maybe not the best name, haha. But it's really just a way for your wireless adapter to pick up on all the network traffic that's happening around it, not just data that's meant specifically for it.
So instead of just seeing our own digital mail, it's like we can suddenly intercept the entire postal service. That's a lot of data.
Exactly. And while that can be super valuable for network admins or security researchers, it also shows just how easily this stuff could be misused.
That's a really good point. It's one thing to understand how these commands work, but knowing how they can be used ethically or unethically is really important.
I completely agree. It's like the old saying goes, knowledge without awareness is like a car without brakes.
Now, the source also gets into this whole idea of changing your network identity, which sounds straight out of a spy movie.
Yeah, we're talking about IP address and MAN address spoofing. Remember how we were saying your IP address is kind of like your digital home address? Well, with ifconfig, you can actually change that address temporarily, make it look like all your traffic is coming from somewhere else entirely.
Like you're putting on a digital disguise so you can blend in or even pretend to be someone else online.
Exactly. And it's not just about changing your IP address either. You can spoof your MANCHIS address too, which is that unique ID tied to your network adapter.
Okay, I'm definitely starting to see how these seemingly simple commands can be used to build a whole new digital identity, which is both incredibly cool and also kind of unnerving. But with great power comes great responsibility, right?
Couldn't have said it better myself. We'll definitely dig into the ethical stuff a bit later on.
Good, because I think we're already starting to see the potential here for both good and, well, maybe not so good. Before we go too far, though, the source mentions something called a DHCP server and a command called dclient. What exactly is a DHCP server?
You can think of a DHCP server like a digital landlord, in a way. See, when you connect to a network, your device usually needs an IP address to communicate. And the DHCP server is like the landlord.
Yeah.
It gives out those temporary IP addresses to devices for as long as they're connected to the network.
So it's kind of like checking into a hotel and getting a temporary room key, that IP address, for the length of your stay.
Perfect analogy. And the client command, that's how your device actually talks to that digital landlord, requesting an IP address and any other network configuration stuff.
This is fascinating, but how does it all tie back into, say, someone who's really looking to understand the ins and outs of network security?
Well, here's the thing. DHCP servers, they keep these logs of all the IP addresses they give out. And those logs, they're incredibly valuable if you want to track network activity. Like imagine being able to see which device had which IP address at what time. Pretty insightful, right?
Wow, it's like having a digital fingerprint for every device that connects to that network.
Exactly. And while that kind of information can be really important for network admins and security pros, it also shows how that info could potentially be exploited.
So we've uncovered a lot already, from basically dissecting a network with ifconfig to figuring out how to put on a digital disguise. But this journey into the heart of Linux networking isn't over yet. Our source goes deeper into this thing called the domain name system, or DNS. And honestly, DNS has always seemed like this big, mysterious web to me.
Yeah, it's definitely complex, but at its core, DNS is actually pretty simple. Think of it like the internet's phone book.
Okay, how so?
Well, it takes these domain names that we use, like google.com, which are easy for us to remember, and it translates them into IP addresses, those strings of numbers that computers use to actually talk to each other.
Right, makes sense. But our source hints that DNS itself can be a playground for, people looking to exploit networks.
Oh, absolutely. DNS is a gold mine of information if you know how to look.
Yeah, and what's the go-to tool for tapping into that gold mine?
That would be the dig command.
Dig.
Yep. With dig, you can actually query DNS servers directly. You can uncover all sorts of stuff that might not be obvious at first glance.
So if config is like getting a network's blueprint, then dig is like getting your hands on the architectural plans. We're
Right.
talking about seeing the hidden structure, the connections behind the scenes.
Exactly. And what kind of information can we dig up with dig? Let's say you want to know where a server is physically located, or what subdomains are associated with a website, or even what email servers a company uses. Dig can help you figure all of that out.
It's like having a digital magnifying glass zoom right in on the details.
Precisely. But just like with any powerful tool, it can be used for good,
Yeah.
or, well, not so good.
Which brings us right back to the importance of understanding not just how these commands work, but also the potential impact they can have. Now, the source also mentioned something called the hosts file. Sounds harmless enough. What is that, and how does it fit into all of this network manipulation stuff?
So the hosts file, think of it as your own personal DNS override switch.
Override switch.
Yeah, basically. It's a file on your computer that does the same thing as DNS. It maps domain names to IP addresses.
Yeah.
But here's the thing. Your computer will actually check the hosts file before it checks DNS.
So it's like having a secret backdoor to redirect traffic, completely bypass the usual route.
Exactly. Now, this can be really useful for web developers who are testing out websites locally, but of course it also makes it a really tempting target for, shall we say, less than ethical hackers.
Let's say someone wanted to redirect people to a fake website, maybe to steal their login info. Could they do that by messing with the hosts file?
Absolutely. If you change how a domain name is mapped in the host file, you can basically send traffic to a whole different server, and the user would have no idea.
That is both brilliant and kind of terrifying. Really highlights how even something as simple as the host file can create huge security risks. There's a recurring theme here, isn't there? Whether it's analyzing network setups, capturing wireless data, or even manipulating DNS, knowledge is power. And that power can be used in both good ways and bad ways.
Exactly. It's not really about the tools themselves being good or bad. It's all about the intent behind them. And that's where really understanding these concepts is so important.
It's like they say, knowledge is the best defense, right? By shining a light on these techniques, we can actually learn to spot them, learn to protect ourselves from them. Before we move on, though, I want to circle back to something you mentioned earlier. Those DHCP servers and their logs, how can those logs actually be used to track someone's activity on a network, and what does that mean for someone trying to, say, cover their tracks? It's amazing how these digital breadcrumbs, like DHCP logs, can be used to retrace someone's steps through a network. It's like a digital detective story.
It is rather fascinating. Every time a device connects to a network, it leaves a trace, a record of its presence. And those records can be incredibly revealing.
So, if someone were trying to move through a network undetected, to avoid leaving those digital footprints, what strategies could they employ?
Well, they might try to spoof their MSE address, making it seem like their traffic is coming from a different device. Or they could constantly request new IP addresses from the DHCP server, creating a tangled web of connections designed to confuse and mislead.
It's like trying to erase your footprints in the sand by constantly changing your shoes and walking in erratic patterns. But even then, a skilled investigator might still be able to piece together the clues.
Exactly. There's always a trace, a whisper of activity that can be amplified with the right tools and expertise.
We've covered so much ground in this deep dive. We started by peeling back the layers of our own networks with ifconfig, revealing the hidden anatomy of our connections. Then we explored the wireless realm with iconfig, learning how to capture and analyze the invisible signals that surround us.
And let's not forget our foray into the world of DNS manipulation, where we discovered how to use DIG to unearth hidden network information and even manipulate traffic flow with the host file.
It's been an eye-opening journey into a world that's often hidden in plain sight. But the real takeaway here is the power of knowledge.
Absolutely. The more we understand about how networks work, the better equipped we are to navigate their complexities, identify potential vulnerabilities, and ultimately make informed decisions about our own security.
So, as we wrap up this deep dive, I'm left with a sense of both wonder and caution. The digital world is a vast and ever-evolving landscape, full of possibilities and potential pitfalls.
It certainly is. But with curiosity as our compass and knowledge as our guide, we can navigate this landscape safely and responsibly.
Well said. This has been a deep dive into the essential commands of Linux networking. Until next time, stay curious and keep exploring.